Dusty's discovery. Dusty was off kilter. Jebediah pegged it right off. The blue heeler, normally a paragon of canine composure post-breakfast, was a restless spirit by the porch. A low whine, a vibrational rumble in Jebediah's ribcage, punctuated his anxious pacing. He nosed the old cowboy's hand, slick and cool, then dart a few strides toward the east pasture, only to retreat, tail tucked, eyes reflecting a disquieting urgency. "What's eating at you, boy?" Jebediah rasped, his voice a gravelly testament to decades under the harsh sun, swirling dust devils and too much whiskey. He scanned the horizon, the nascent sun already a searing brand despite the shield of his brow. Nothing seemed amiss. The cattle grazed, the windmill creaked a steady rhythm in the gentle breeze, and the vultures hadn't yet begun their morbid ballet, a reliable indicator of bovine well-being. Dusty's whine escalated, and he began scratching at Jebediah's scuffed leather boots. He brushed past him, again angling toward the east pasture, ears cocked, nostrils flaring, as if trying to decipher a message on the wind. Jebediah sighed. He learned not to dismiss Dusty's gut feelings. The dog had been his guardian angel more times than he'd admit, rescuing him from a raging torrent, signaling the presence of venomous coils in the barn rafters, even alerting him to a mountain lion's stealthy reconnaissance of the ranch perimeter. Dusty possessed an innate sensitivity and attunement to the land that Jebediah, despite his years tilling it, could only admire. All right, Jebediah conceded, levering himself up from the porch swing. His joints offered a creaking, popping symphony of complaint. "Let's see what's got your fur ruffled." He grasped his walking stick, a seasoned piece of mesquite shaped by his own hand long ago, and followed Dusty's lead. The sun hammered Jebediah's back as he labored across the parched earth. The air, thin and biting, carried the tang of sage and baked clay. His vision, hazed by cataracts, struggled to find purchase on the uneven ground. He stumbled repeatedly, relying on the stick for stability. Dusty, aware of Jebediah's struggle, tempered his speed, circling back to nudge the old man's hand periodically, a silent "come on, Gramps," keep up conveyed in his touch. They progressed in silence, punctuated only by the crunch of Jebediah's boots on the arid soil and Dusty's occasional fretful whimper. Finally, they arrived at the desiccated creek bed that cleaved the east pasture. It was a scar upon the land, a constant reminder of the unrelenting drought that had strangled the region. The once vibrant waterway had long since surrendered, leaving behind a fractured expanse of dust and stone. Dusty halted at the creek's edge, his body taut, his gaze fixed on a point in the distance. He unleashed a torrent of sharp, agitated barks, the sound echoing across the stark tableau. This wasn't the playful yip of a rabbit chase or the guarded growl reserved for strangers. This was a bark laced with desperation, a fervent plea. Jebediah squinted, trying to discern what had seized Dusty's attention. The glare reflecting off the bleached rocks was nearly blinding. He could decipher only shimmering heat devils and the distorted outlines of the distant bluffs. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his voice creaking with age. "What do you see?" Dusty ignored him, plunging into the creek bed and bolting toward a thicket of stunted brush and withered cottonwoods. His barks intensified, becoming more frantic, more urgent. Jebediah hesitated. The creek bed was a treacherous labyrinth of loose stones and concealed pits. He was an old man, his movements slow, his vision failing. A fall could easily result in a broken bone. But Dusty's insistence was undeniable. He had never witnessed such a display of canine distress. "All right," he muttered, drawing a deep breath. "All right, you stubborn mutt. Just don't expect a piggyback ride if I snap my leg." He gingerly lowered himself into the creek bed, his joints erupting in a chorus of groans. The ground was unstable, and he leaned heavily on his walking stick for support. The sun's relentless heat bore down, sweat trickling into his eyes. He followed the sound of Dusty's increasingly frenzied barks, his heart thudding in his chest. What had provoked such a reaction? A snake? An injured creature? Or something far more sinister? Rounding the screen of scrub brush, he saw it. Initially, he mistook it for a scrap of discarded fabric, a cast-off blanket abandoned by some thoughtless traveler. But then the form took shape, the curve of a slender limb, the glimmer of sunlight on something pale and unmoving. It was a girl. She lay prostrate in the dust, her body partially obscured by the brush. Her clothes were ripped and soiled, her hair a tangled mat of grime and dry blood. Her face was ashen and drawn, her eyes sealed shut. Jebediah's breath snagged in his throat. He lurched forward, his walking stick clattering against the stones. Dusty whined softly, nudging the girl's hand with his nose. "Oh, sweet, merciful heavens," Jebediah breathed, his voice trembling. "What's this now?" He knelt beside the girl, his ancient hands trembling as he reached to touch her. Her skin was cold and clammy. He could scarcely detect a pulse. She clung to life by a thread. Jebediah looked to Dusty, his eyes reflecting a mix of dread and hope. The dog mirrored his gaze, his brown eyes beseeching. He knew what he had to do. A girl in the dust. Dusty emitted a low, rumbling whine that vibrated against the leather of Jebediah's boots. He nudged the girl, his damp nose leaving a streak on her dirt-streaked cheek. Heat waves pulsed above the cracked earth, the air thick with the aroma of sun-baked ground and dry clay. Kneeling, Jebediah felt the familiar crackle and pop of his aging joints. He pressed a weathered hand to her brow. Scalding. He recoiled as if burnt. Fever raged within her, painting her exposed skin a dangerous scarlet above the grime. He gently swept a tangle of faded hair from her face. No older than 10 or 11, he guessed. Her tattered cotton dress and worn boots spoke of a long, punishing trek, or perhaps a desperate flight. A careful examination revealed bruises blossoming on her thin arms, violet shadows against her pallor. Her ankle was grotesquely swollen, jutting at an awkward angle beneath a dust-caked boot. Jebediah's jaw hardened. Whatever ordeal she'd suffered, it had been brutal. He settled back on his heels, the enormity of the situation a heavy weight. Out here, swallowed by the vastness, a child was fading. He'd encountered no one for weeks, save the occasional circling buzzard, a morbid reminder of the land's slow death. His gaze swept the horizon, a blurred line where the bleached earth met the pitiless sky. The ranch drifted into his thoughts, the silent rooms, the echoes that haunted the halls. Years had passed since laughter had resonated within those walls, since the patter of little feet had graced its floors. A solitary man, he preferred the quiet rhythms of the land and the companionship of his dog to the clamor of civilization. Yet, gazing at this frail, broken child, something stirred within him, a long-dormant ember, something akin to responsibility. More than that, a deep, instinctive need to shield the vulnerable. He had spent his life coaxing sustenance from this harsh land, battling the elements, defying adversity. He understood struggle, endurance. And this girl, despite her youth, clearly knew it too. Dusty whined again, nudging her hand with his snout, his usually bright eyes clouded with concern. Jebediah knew what he must do. He reached down, gently lifting the girl into his arms. She was shockingly light, her small form yielding against his chest. Her breath hitched in ragged gasps, fragile whispers against the immense silence of the plains. "Easy, little one," he rasped, his voice rusty from disuse. "I've got you." He adjusted her weight, cradling her close as he straightened. His back flared in protest, but he dismissed it. He'd hoisted calves heavier than this. He could manage. "Dusty, heel," he commanded, and the dog fell in a step beside him, tail lowered, eyes fixed on the girl in Jebediah's arms. The trek back felt interminable, each step a testament to his resolve. The sun blazed down, turning the arid ground into a furnace. Sweat drenched Jebediah's shirt, clinging to his back. The girl remained unresponsive, her feverish breaths the only proof of life. He glanced down at her face, at the dusting of freckles across her nose, at the pale, cracked curve of her lips. Who was she? Where'd she come from? and what had driven her to this desolate place. He had no answers, but one truth resonated. He couldn't abandon her to perish. Reaching the ranch as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, the old house seemed to sag with relief. He kicked open the door, carrying the girl inside, into the cool shadows of the front room. Dust motes swirled in the fading light, illuminating the sparse furnishings and the long, reaching shadows. Healing and hesitation. The fever relinquished its grip on the third day. Jebediah, hunched in the armchair beside the bed, nearly missed the turning point. Drowsiness had settled in, punctuated by the windmill's monotonous groan and the persistent drone of flies. A fragile whimper, fainter than a breath of air, startled him awake. Lily's eyes, once clouded and distant, flickered open, the color of a clear twilight sky. Puzzled, she blinked, a faint crease forming on her forehead. "Where am I?" Her voice, a parched whisper, barely carried. Jebediah's heart, dormant for years, jolted back to life. He straightened, his aging joints cracking in protest. "You're my ranch, little one. You've been ill." She struggled to rise, but her body betrayed her. Gently, Jebediah guided her back against the pillow. "Easy. Rest is what you need." Dusty, a steadfast guardian at the bed's foot, thumped his tail feebly against the wooden floor. He rose, stretched languidly, and nudged Lily's hand with his cool, wet nose. A ghost of a smile touched Lily's lips. "Hello there, boy." Her hand trembled as she stroked Dusty's head. The dog responded with a low, contented rumble deep in his chest. Watching them, Jebediah felt a strange constriction in his throat. Not since Sarah had Dusty shown such unguarded affection. He cleared his throat, the sound grating in the stillness. "I'll fetch you some water." The subsequent days brought a slow, gradual return to strength. Jebediah, a creature of habit and solitude, adjusted to Lily's needs with surprising ease. He prepared simple nourishment, broth and soft grains, patiently spooning it into her until her appetite returned. He tended to her bandages, his calloused hands unexpectedly tender, and filled the silence with tales of the ranch, the headstrong cattle, the sly coyotes, anything to divert her from the lingering weakness. In turn, Lily began to explore the ranch, Dusty faithfully by her side. She spent hours in the stable, whispering secrets to the horses and scratching the mangy barn cats behind their ears. She even managed to elicit tentative chirps from the chickens, usually sent scattering by Jebediah's approach. One afternoon, Jebediah discovered her in the dusty corral, encircled by a cluster of goats. She was weaving wildflowers into their rough beards, her face radiant with amusement. The goats, typically nervous and quick to butt heads, stood placidly, as if captivated by her presence. He leaned against the fence, observing her. An unfamiliar warmth bloomed within him, catching him off guard. It had been an eternity since he'd witnessed such unadulterated joy. As if sensing his gaze, Lily glanced up, her smile widening. "They like the flowers," she announced, her voice regaining its strength. "They're saying thank you." Jebediah chuckled, a rusty sound he'd almost forgotten he possessed. "Goats don't talk, Lily." "Maybe not with words," she countered, her eyes bright with playful defiance. "But they speak all the same." He pushed away from the fence, the smile fading, replaced by a guarded expression. "It's getting late. Time to come inside." The warmth dissipated as abruptly as it had appeared, leaving a lingering chill. He immersed himself in chores, mending fences, inspecting water troughs, seeking refuge from thoughts of the girl who had somehow breathed vitality into his desolate existence. Later that night, after Lily had drifted to sleep in the small room he'd prepared, Jebediah sat on the porch, gazing at the vast, star-studded canvas of the night sky. Staring into the darkness, he saw Lily's smiling face superimposed on the inky void. He thought of Sarah, her laughter carried on the wind, her tender touch of phantom sensation on his skin. He recalled the promises they'd made, the life they'd envisioned, a life cruelly stolen from them. He had erected these walls around himself, brick by agonizing brick, convinced of his inability to protect those he loved. And now, Lily, a delicate yet resilient bloom, pushing through the arid landscape of his heart. Could he risk it again? Could he open himself to the potential for loss, for pain, for devastating heartbreak? Or was he destined to remain forever isolated, a lonely figure etched against the unforgiving horizon? He looked down at Dusty, resting his head on his knee, his loyal brown eyes fixed on him. The dog nudged his hand, a silent plea for reassurance. Jebediah sighed, the sound heavy with doubt and conflicting emotions. He scratched Dusty behind the ears, the familiar gesture a small balm for his troubled soul. He couldn't foresee what the future held, but one thing was certain. He couldn't simply abandon her. He owed her that much, at the very least. And perhaps, just perhaps, he owed it to himself as well. The preacher's prophecy, a dust devil pirouette across the sun-baked earth, as Jebediah fought with the stubborn gate. Lily, perched bird-like on the fence, kicked her heels, a straw sunbonnet guarding her face. Blue, his constant canine shadow, tongue lolling, sought refuge from the heat at her feet. The air itself seemed to waver, distorting the distant hills. The groan of Ancient would heralded the arrival of a wagon drawn by 2 weary mules. A lean, sun-scorched man, a Bible gripped in his hand, occupied the driver's seat. A somber black suit clung to him, powdered with road dust that also filmed his spectacles. "Howdy," Jebediah greeted, his voice gravelly but devoid of malice. "Just passing through, are you?" "Indeed," the man responded, his voice a surprising boom in the stillness. "Reverend Elijah, at your service. I'm walking the Lord's path, sowing seeds of faith. Could I perhaps trouble you for a bit of water and a handful of oats for my beasts?" Jebediah conceded with a curt nod. "Well's over yonder. Lily May, fetch the Reverend's mule some grain." Lily vaulted down, her bare feet silent on the hard-packed soil. "Of course, Jebediah." She offered Reverend Elijah a radiant smile. "Welcome to the ranch." While Lily cared for the animals, Jebediah and the preacher shared a moment of quiet, punctuated only by the squeal of the well pump as Jebediah drew water. Reverend Elijah watched Lily, his gaze contemplative. "A blessing, that child," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "A true gift." Jebediah grunted, unconvinced. "Got grit, I'll grant her that." Reverend Elijah chuckled, a dry, leafy sound. "More than grit, son. She radiates an inner light. I can feel it." He paused, adjusting his spectacles. "Tell me, are you acquainted with any local prophecies?" Jebediah's brow furrowed. "Prophecies? Around these parts? You're barking up the wrong tree. Preacher, this ain't no breeding ground for visions." "Humph," the preacher responded, undeterred. "I heard tell of a Catwoman, a blue healer companion, and a damsel in distress, destined, they say, to meet in this forsaken place. The woman, his promised bride, would usher in hope and mend what's broken." Jebediah snorted, shaking his head. "Sounds like a yarn spun by some addled coot. I got no time for such foolishness." He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. Lily, returning from her task, caught the tail end of their conversation. Her eyes sparked with intrigue. A prophecy? A promised bride? She looked at Jebediah, then at Blue, a playful light dancing in her eyes. Reverend Elijah turned towards her, his gaze sharp and knowing. "The Lord moves in mysterious ways, child. What may appear as mere coincidence is often divine design. Keep your heart open, and the truth may be revealed." Jebediah scoffed. "Don't clutter her mind with such nonsense, preacher. Truth around here is measured in sweat and survival." He turned to Lily, his voice gentler. "Pay him no mind, Lily May. It's just an old wives' tale." Yet Lily was clearly hooked. She examined Jebediah, noting the deep lines around his eyes, the weariness etched into his very stance. Could this taciturn, solitary man be part of some grand design? A glance at Blue, whose tail thumped the ground with unrestrained enthusiasm, seemed to whisper an affirmative. Maybe, she murmured, her voice a soft breath. Maybe there's more than meets the eye. Reverend Elijah smiled knowingly. Time will tell, child. Time will tell. He finished his water, dabbed at his mouth with a handkerchief, and climbed back onto his wagon. Thank you for your hospitality, he said to Jebediah. May the Lord guide your path. He offered Lily a wink. And yours, child, especially yours. With a crack of the reins, the mule strained forward, the wagon rumbling as it vanished down the dusty track. Jebediah watched him depart, a scowl etched on his face. Preachers, he grumbled, always stirring the pot. Lily, however, remained silent, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the Reverend Elijah had disappeared. The prophecy resonated within her, a seed of possibility sown in the arid landscape of her past. A cattleman, a blue healer, and a damsel in distress. It sounded suspiciously like her and Jebediah. Could it be? Could she, Lily Mae Thornton, actually be someone's promised bride? Her eyes darted back to Jebediah. He was already wrestling with the gate again, his brow furrowed in concentration. He seemed blissfully unaware, dismissing the notion as readily as he dismissed anything that threatened his carefully guarded solitude. But Lily suspected otherwise. She sensed the ember of something smoldering beneath his gruff exterior, a vulnerability she instinctively understood. And she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that the Reverend Elijah's prophecy, however outlandish it seemed, might contain a kernel of truth. The question now became, what was she going to do with it? Shadows of the past. Dust devils pirouette across the baked earth, a jeering contrast to the heavy quiet that descended after Reverend Elijah's departure. Jebediah wrestled with a stretch of barbed wire, the hammer's sharp ring against metal a futile attempt to drown the unease twisting his insides. Inside, Lily feigned reading, though he knew her thoughts were snared by the preacher's pronouncements, trying to shoehorn herself into some grand, imagined destiny. A hawk's scream, like a shard of glass, pierced the stillness. Then, a distant drumming, hooves. Jebediah straightened, shading his eyes. Riders, a half-dozen or more, were etching a trail on the horizon. Their approach lacked any neighborly ease. A coiled tension radiated from their set shoulders and the tautness of their grip on the reins. "Lily," he roared, voice roughened by alarm. "Inside? Now!" He tossed the hammer aside and charged towards the house, Winchester already gripped in his hand. Blue, sensing danger, materialized beside him, a guttural rumble vibrating in his throat. The riders materialized from the shimmering heat haze, their appearances hardening into sharp relief. A ragtag bunch clad in worn leather and sun-bleached cotton, faces obscured by wide brims and dusty bandanas. But the woman leading them struck a discordant note, radiating an unsettling charisma. Her features were honed, almost hawkish, eyes sparkling with a glacial cunning. As they drew their horses to a halt before the porch, Lily stepped out, her face drained of color, but her stance resolute. Jebediah moved to interpose himself, muscles coiled, the Winchester raised. "Well, now," the woman rasped, her voice like sandpaper on stone. "Look what we have here. Little Lily Mae Thornton. Playing pioneer, are we?" Lily recoiled slightly, recognition flickering in her eyes. "Miss Abigail," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "It's Madame Abigail, girl," she snapped, dismounting with a fluid grace that defied her years. Tossing her reins to a follower, she advanced, her gaze laser-locked on Lily. "Come now, Lily. Don't make this difficult. Time to come back to where you belong." "This is my home," Lily declared, her voice gaining resilience. She stepped out from behind Jebediah, tilting her chin in defiance. Madame Abigail emitted a dry, joyless laugh. "Home? This dilapidated shack? Don't be ridiculous. You belong back at the orphanage. You have responsibilities." Her gaze flicked to Jebediah, lips pursing in distaste. "Unless, of course, this gentleman is aware of your little acquisition." Jebediah's fingers tightened around the Winchester's stock. "Acquisition? What's she talking about?" "Oh, Hasn't she enlightened you, Lily dear? Madame Abigail purred, her eyes glittering with malicious glee. About the map? The one you so thoughtfully liberated from my office? The one that points to, well, let's just say a considerably valuable prize. A flush crept up Lily's neck. It wasn't yours to take, she shot back. It belonged to my parents. Madame Abigail's smile evaporated, replaced by a mask of raw fury. Lies. Utter lies. That map is the property of the orphanage, and you, girl, are going to relinquish it, one way or another. She signaled to her men. Seize her. The men surged forward, their eyes alight with avarice and a streak of brutality. Blue surged forward, snapping at their boots, buying Jebediah a precious breath. He swung the Winchester, leveling it at Madame Abigail's chest. Stay back, he bellowed, his voice erupting with untamed fury. She's not going anywhere with you. Madame Abigail curled her lip. You imagine you can stop us, old man? 1 against 7? Besides, she hissed, dripping venom, that little thief possesses something that's mine, something I'm willing to spill blood for. The specters of the past had ridden in, demanding their pound of flesh. Secrets and standoff. The wind shrieked, a mirror to the storm raging within Lily. Yet she stood tall, her slight frame a beacon of defiance that defied her tender years. That map isn't theirs, she declared, voice unwavering despite the odds. It belonged to Mr. Abernathy, master of the workhouse. Madame Abigail's rouged lips twisted in disdain. He ran it courtesy of us, child. We bankrolled the enterprise. Lily spat, the dust swirling around her defiance. Bankrolled the abuse and deprivation. Bankrolled the endless toil searching for his phantom fortune. Jebediah interposed himself, a bulwark between Lily and the encroaching threat. Tension crackled, an electric current of unspoken menace. His gaze remained locked on Madame Abigail, but his hand drifted towards the worn grip of his revolver. Treasure, you say? Jebediah's tone was a silken threat. Lily affirmed with a nod, her eyes blazing. A motherlode, a veritable El Dorado. Abernathy was obsessed, claiming it as a birthright pilfered from his ancestors. He exploited the children, forced us to sift through ancient records, comb the barren hills for any trace. A ripple of interest stirred amongst the hardened men. Gold, that glittering siren, could tempt even the most ruthless soul. He uncovered something, Lily stated, drawing a fragile parchment square from within her patched dress. It was aged and delicate, edges softened by time. This, a fragment of the map. Abigail's expression shifted, a covetous glint replacing her initial iciness. Hand it over, girl. Lily tightened her grasp. No, this is what I fled for. This is why I nearly perished. Her voice faltered, the harrowing memory of her escape still vivid. He intended to use it. He planned to enslave us all in his precious mind. A wave of protective fury surged through Jebediah. He'd witnessed enough depravity in his time, and the thought of this child enduring such cruelty ignited a long-dormant ember within him. She's not returning, he affirmed, his voice a low growl of warning. And she's giving you nothing. Abigail's laugh was a dry rasp, grating against the silence of the plains. You imagine you can shield her, old coot? You and whose army? She gestured to her posse, each one armed and seasoned by years beyond the law's reach. We'll seize what's rightfully ours, by force, should it prove necessary. The outlaws spread out, encircling Jebediah and Lily. The sinking sun cast elongated, grotesque shadows, painting the scene in shades of umber and dread. The air hung thick with the aroma of dust and anxiety. Lily, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm, stood resolute at Jebediah's side. She might be small, but she was far from helpless. She had weathered the storm of the orphanage, outrun her pursuers, and she would prevail again. I possess another piece, Lily announced, her voice resonating with newfound resolve. Every I turned to her. I committed it to memory before I escaped. You will never have it unless you let us leave. Abigail hesitated, Her gaze narrowed in calculation. A hollow boast. Is it? Lily countered, a spark of rebellion in her gaze. Care to gamble? Risk losing everything. The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. The lone sound was the mournful whistle of the wind weaving through the parched grasses, a lament for the violence about to erupt. Jebediah knew the odds were stacked against him, but retreat was not an option. He had sworn to safeguard Lily, and he intended to fulfill that promise, even at the cost of his own life. Defending the ranch. Madame Abigail's lip curled. So be it, she hissed, gesturing sharply. Take the ranch. The order unleashed chaos. Riders spurred their horses forward, kicking up dust that swirled in the afternoon sun. Gunfire cracked the air, shattering the fragile peace Jebediah had carved out in this desolate land. Dusty, hackles raised, launched himself at the lead horse, nipping at its heels with surprising ferocity. The horse reared, throwing its rider, a burly man with a scarred face, to the ground. Dusty danced away from the flailing hooves, a blur of brown fur and unwavering loyalty. Get inside, Lily, Jebediah roared, shoving her towards the cabin. He grabbed his rifle from the porch, the familiar weight settling reassuringly in his hands. Years melted away as instinct took over. He was no longer a broken man haunted by the past. He was a protector, and this was his land. Lily hesitated, her eyes wide with fear, but she saw the steel in Jebediah's gaze. She knew arguing was pointless. Instead, she darted inside, her mind already racing. She couldn't just hide. She had to help. Jebediah moved with a speed that belied his age, taking cover behind the water trough. He squeezed off a shot, and a rider screamed, clutching his arm. The outlaws returned fire, bullets splintering the wood around him. He risked a glance towards the cabin. Lily was gone from the window. Dusty continued his valiant, if slightly insane, defense. He weaved between the horses, barking furiously, distracting the riders and giving Jebediah precious seconds to reload. One of the outlaws managed to land a kick, sending Dusty yelping, but the dog scrambled back to his feet, undeterred. Inside the cabin, Lily rummaged through Jebediah's meager supplies. Her fingers closed around a box of nails and a ball of twine. An idea sparked in her mind. She grabbed a handful of nails and raced to the back window. Outside, the battle raged. Jebediah picked off another rider, but more were closing in. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and they were getting closer to the house. He had to find a way to slow them down. Suddenly, a chorus of pained yells erupted from the approaching riders. Their horses stumbled, hooves clattering against something sharp. Lily had scattered the nails across the ground behind the cabin. It wasn't much, but it bought them time. Jebediah grinned grimly. That girl was quick on her feet. He used the distraction to reposition himself, moving towards the barn. He knew the terrain better than anyone. He could use it to his advantage. Lily, emboldened by her success, found a can of kerosene and a rag. She soaked the rag and tied it to a stick, creating a makeshift torch. She remembered Jebediah telling her about the dry brush that grew near the south fence. If she could set it alight, it might create a firebreak, slowing the outlaws' advance. She slipped out the back door, keeping low to the ground. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and smoke. She could hear Dusty barking furiously, his unwavering spirit a beacon in the chaos. She reached the fence and quickly lit the torch. The dry brush ignited instantly, flames licking upwards, creating a wall of fire. The heat was intense, but she stood her ground, feeding the flames with more brush. The outlaws cursed as they were forced to detour around the fire. Madame Abigail watched from a distance, her face contorted with rage. Her carefully laid plans were unraveling. Jebediah emerged from the barn, leading his old horse, Maggie. He swung himself into the saddle, the familiar leather creaking beneath him. He might be old, but he wasn't finished yet. He spurred Maggie forward, galloping toward the outlaws. He fired his rifle, hitting another rider. The remaining outlaws hesitated, surprised by his sudden attack. Lily saw her chance. She grabbed a handful of rocks from the ground and hurled them at the horses, aiming for their flanks. The horses whinnied in distress, bucking and rearing. The outlaws were in disarray. Jebediah, with Maggie's help, charged through their ranks, scattering them like leaves in the wind. The fire blazed behind them, creating a natural barrier. Madame Abigail, seeing the tide turning, let out a frustrated scream. "Fall back," she yelled. "We'll be back." The outlaws retreated, disappearing into the dust and shadows. The gunfire subsided, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and Dusty's panting. Jebediah dismounted, his legs shaky. He leaned against Maggie, catching his breath. He looked at Lily, her face smudged with dirt and soot, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and triumph. Dusty bounded over to her, licking her face. "You okay, Lily?" he asked, his voice hoarse. She nodded, her chest heaving. "We did it, Jebediah. We defended the ranch." He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "We did," he said. "We did." But he knew, deep down, this was just the beginning. Madame Abigail would be back. And next time, they might not be so lucky. Justice and realization. The surviving outlaws, momentarily paralyzed by Jebediah's swift brutality, huddled back towards the barn. Dusty, sensing their intent, erupted in a frenzy of barks, his tail a stiff semaphore of alarm. Lily, still riding the wave of adrenaline, snatched up a pitchfork. Its prongs glinted menacingly in the twilight. "They figure they can just waltz in and take what's ours," she declared, her voice surprisingly firm. "Let's disabuse them of that notion." Jebediah, meeting her resolute gaze, felt a novel stirring within him. Something beyond mere gratitude, bordering on respect. He watched as Lily, Dusty a whirlwind at her ankles, retreated cautiously into the barn. He understood her ploy, a lure. A near imperceptible nod was his only acknowledgement as he sought cover behind a haystack near the barn's gaping maw, rifle at the ready. The outlaws, emboldened by their dwindling numbers and lust for plunder, surged ahead, bellowing threats that hung in the air. They hadn't anticipated such staunch resistance, certainly not a cleverly laid ambush. As the first few bandits crossed the threshold, Lily and Dusty unleashed their counterattack. With unexpected leverage, Lily used the pitchfork to flip a concealed stack of loose boards, sending them cascading down upon the intruders. Dusty, a streak of brown fur and snapping teeth, harried their heels, escalating the pandemonium. The barn transformed into a maelstrom of shouts and scrambling limbs. Disoriented and ensnared in the makeshift barricade, the outlaws proved easy prey. Jebediah emerged from concealment, his rifle cracking with sharp reports. One by one, the remaining brigands succumbed, either felled by Jebediah's deadly aim or hobbled by Lily's ingenious trap. Soon, only the whimpers of the wounded and Dusty's triumphant yaps punctuated the stillness. Lily, chest heaving, leaned against the stall, her face streaked with grime and hay dust. Jebediah holstered his weapon and approached, his expression an inscrutable mask. "You okay, Lily?" he inquired, his tone gruff but laced with concern. "Couldn't be better," she quipped, a ghost of a smile gracing her lips. Though a bath wouldn't go amiss. The clatter of approaching hooves shattered the calm. A familiar voice boomed. "Jebediah? Jebediah, you there?" Sheriff Brody, leading a small posse, galloped into the yard, his face etched with worry. He dismounted, his eyes widening as he took in the scene of defeated desperados. "What in blazes happened here?" he demanded, incredulous. "Abigail sent them," Jebediah stated flatly. "Come to claim the ranch." Brody cursed under his breath. "That viper's been a constant aggravation. I should have known threats wouldn't be enough." He gestured to his deputies. "Round up these varmints and haul them to the jailhouse. We'll untangle this mess come morning." As the deputies cuffed the outlaws, Brody turned back to Jebediah. "You and the girl did good, Jebediah. Mighty good. I'll need statements from you both first thing." "We'll be around," Jebediah replied, his gaze drawn to Lily as she stroked Dusty's fur. With the outlaws subdued and the ranch secure, a tentative peace descended over the land. The sheriff and his posse departed, leaving Jebediah, Lily, and Dusty alone in the evening's embrace. Later, as Lily doctored Dusty's minor scrapes in the kitchen, Jebediah lingered in the doorway, observing her. Lamplight bathed her features in a soft glow, accentuating both her delicate beauty and the steely resolve within. He recalled the preacher's long-ago pronouncements. "A light will pierce your darkness, Jebediah. A woman of courage and mercy who will mend your spirit and rekindle your belief." He dismissed it as the ravings of a doddering fool. But now, watching Lily, he wondered if the prophecy was unfolding. She possessed bravery, resourcefulness, and an unwavering kindness. Despite all her trials, her unyielding optimism was steadily eroding the fortress he had constructed around his heart. He cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Lily," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Thank you." Lily glanced up, her eyes locking with his. "For what, Jebediah?" "For helping me defend my home. For being you." A delicate flush colored her cheeks. "You would have done the same for me," she murmured. Jebediah knew her words held truth. He would have. The recognition hit him with surprising force, a tangible blow. He was changing irrevocably. She was the catalyst. Though uncertain if he was ready for the transformation, he knew one thing with absolute clarity. He would expend every ounce of his being to safeguard her. Even if it meant facing Madame Abigail's fury, even if it meant confronting the demons that haunted his past. Lily Mae Thornton, the woman he'd found teetering on the brink of death, was more than just hired help. She was a beacon in his shadowed existence, and he wouldn't allow anyone to snuff out her light. A new beginning. The morning sun burnished the repaired fence posts, each upright a testament to hard-won strength. Jebediah's gaze drifted to Lily as she tended the chickens, her laughter a bright chime carried on the breeze. He'd found himself drawn to her lately, noticing the way she nurtured the struggling garden back to life, the tender way she comforted Dusty, the steadfast compassion shining in her eyes. A fierce protectiveness bloomed within him, a desire to cherish that spirit, to greet it anew each dawn. Yet, the words caught in his throat, heavy as river stones against the soaring feeling she inspired. He cleared it, the sound amplified in the hushed air. "Lily," he began, the word emerging more gruffly than he intended. He saw her still, a slight furrow creasing her brow with concern. "Got something I need to say." He scuffed at a stray piece of gravel, the gesture betraying his unease. Eloquence wasn't his forte. He was a man of the land, at ease amidst the silent expanse of the plains, but paralyzed by this raw exposure. "Since you came here," he faltered, searching for the precise phrasing to articulate the quake she'd caused in his existence. "This place feels different, vibrant, and it's all on account of you." He looked up, meeting her gaze head-on. Her eyes mirrored surprise mingled with a touch of trepidation. He pressed on, the words finally surging forth. "I ain't the easiest fella to get along with, I know that. I'm stubborn, and I got ghosts." He gestured vaguely toward the weathered ranch house, toward the echoes that lingered within its walls. "But you show me a glimpse of how to maybe shed some of that. To begin again." He drew a deep breath, the air alive with wildflower perfume and anticipation. From his pocket, he produced a small, time-worn silver ring. His mother's, a simple band etched with a single, unfurling rose. He'd never envisioned offering it to anyone. He extended it toward her, his hand betraying a slight tremor. "Lily Mae Thornton," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The ensuing silence throbbed. He scrutinized her face, searching for any flicker, any sign. He saw surprise morph into confusion, then something akin to dawning hope. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she reached out, her fingers lightly brushing his. "Jebediah," she breathed, her voice fragile. "Are you certain?" He nodded, his throat constricted. He wasn't offering her an effortless existence, draped in luxury. He offered a life of honest toil, temperamental weather, shared sunsets, and quiet awakenings. but also his heart, his unwavering fealty, his protection. More sure than I've ever been of anything in my life, he finally managed. A brilliant smile bloomed across her face, banishing the lingering tears. "Yes," she responded, her voice overflowing with joy. "Yes, Jebediah, I will." He released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding captive. Carefully, he slid the ring onto her finger, the silver glinting against her skin. A perfect fit. He reached out, cupping her face in his hands, his thumbs gently erasing the last vestiges of tears. He peered into her eyes, seeing not merely beauty, but resilience, empathy, and an indomitable spirit. He lowered his head and kissed her, a hesitant touch initially, deepening with each passing heartbeat. A kiss that tasted of promise and absolution, of renewed beginnings and enduring devotion. A kiss that sealed their destinies, binding them together in a manner he could never have foreseen. As they drew apart, breathless and flushed, Dusty stood there, nudging his head against their legs, his tail a blur of joyful motion. He barked once, a resonant sound of approval echoing across the ranch. Lily chuckled, bending to scratch Dusty behind the ears. "Looks like we have an endorsement," she said, her eyes sparkling with mirth. Jebediah smiled, a genuine expression that crinkled the corners of his eyes. The road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges. Madame Abigail still loomed, and other trials would undoubtedly arise. Yet, they wouldn't face them alone. They had each other. And Dusty. He looked at Lily, at the woman who had rekindled the flame in his soul, at the woman he would share his life with. He knew, with absolute certainty, that this was merely the genesis. A fresh dawn, a beginning brimming with love, optimism, and the potential for a future more radiant than he could ever have dreamed. A future forged on the bedrock of family, unwavering loyalty, and the unbreakable connection between a cowboy, his faithful companion, and the ranch girl he found succumbing to the elements, who blossomed into his destined bride.